Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners! The Sounders rule the region! Seattle Sounders is campeón! All creatures great and small.
Rothrock going to collect it. He does just about. Runs into the advertising awning. Low to our left. Ball goes in. Oh, what a cross! And what a goal!
Where's my copy?
I got a bunch of them in the car. I'll get you some.
You're handing them out for free already.
How many
cost on them?
$50.
I'll Venmo you.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. It is Friday. I am Jeremiah O'Shan. We are remote this week, but I am joined, as always, by Niko Moreno on what we learned this week. How's it going, Niko?
What's going on, Jeremiah? Sounder at Heart family. What is going on? Happy to be on as always. Yes, today, kind of feels like a nice, chill, Sunday-like morning.
Don't get a lot of these.
We don't get a lot of these, and I guess they do come, and you don't realize how nice it might be sometimes for those Fridays to be a little bit more calm, no running around. We love being at training. I know I do, but it does feel good to just not have to rush and deal with traffic and stuff. So I'm feeling pretty mellow. Got my coffee right here. So,
well,
I'm ready.
A little calm before the storm, I suppose, because the Sounders have had some light training weeks in the last few weeks, I suppose, last month, I shouldn't say light training weeks. We have not been able to attend as many training sessions over the last month or so as we were used to attending because the Sounders have been on the road so much. This will be their 7th straight game away from Lumen Field. Of course, not technically their 7th straight home game because they played a home game in Spokane, but 7th straight game away from Lumen Field. They will now play 8 straight away from Lumen Field when they play Tigres on Wednesday in the CONCACAFed Champions Cup quarterfinals. But they will, and they also, because they moved a game that was supposed to be on, I guess it was supposed to be between the two legs. I guess it would still been an 8. It was always going to be 8, wasn't it?
Yes,
it was. All right. Well, anyway,
it was going to be 8, but no, hold on. It would have been 9 because you would have added the Tigres game, right?
No, that would have still, no, it was 8. Well, it was 8. The game they moved was going to be on the weekend. It would have come after the 8th game anyway, but whatever.
Gotcha.
Important thing is the Sounders have done remarkably well so far on this road trip. They are 3-1-1. I guess they're 4-1-1. And they are, they have managed this very well. Now the underlying numbers don't always look great. Like they've been giving up a lot of possession. They haven't been taking as many shots. Their offensive numbers do not look spectacular right now, but their defense has really been very impressive during this stretch. Like they talked a lot this offseason about getting better on defense, and it's hard to say that they've done anything but do that. They've only given up 3 goals all year in 7 games.
And they've done it in a unique fashion because of the amount of injuries, rotating pieces, their ability to just get a lot of players behind the ball. It's been different than it feels different than any other defense that I've covered with the team before. And I think that there is a level of grittiness and relentlessness that I tend to equate to character and a team that can really go through bad spells of a game and just push through. And when we look at the whole thing and players that are going to come back, home games that you're going to have, this is a very good situation to be in all aspects, not just results, but as a team and as a collective unit.
Well, the thing is that this, they've said this repeatedly at the start of this trip, which was you can't win the Supporter Shield at this point in the season, but you can definitely lose it. And if they had fallen on their faces and they had gotten eliminated from Champions League and they had failed to, they hadn't gotten as many points as they've gotten from the road, they would have created a very different outlook going forward. And instead, they've put themselves in a position where they really have everything to play for. They're in the CONCACAF Champions Cup quarterfinals. I think this is a manageable series. By the way, we're going to talk to John Arnold from Getting CONCACAF later on in the show, and he's going to do a full preview of this Tigres series. But I just think from a broad perspective, I feel really good about where this team is. And sure, there are some potential, I wouldn't say red flags, but maybe yellow flags about, Albert Rusnak has not gotten off to the best start. You can nitpick the way Jesus Ferreira has played this year. You can get kind of up in your feelings about the injury crisis that has hit again, and we'll get into that as well. But I just think if you take a 10,000-foot view and you say, look, the Sounders are 5-1-1 in all comps. They're 3-1-1 in league play. They won both of their Champions Cup games against what might be the best team in MLS. I feel really good about where things stand right now.
Absolutely. And part of that, at least for me, is that you have now added some players that you maybe didn't know you had. You have put players in situations where they're having to play at a very high level. I think it was Ferreira who we spoke to this week, and he kind of mentioned that, look, us having 2-3 games more than like a Houston team that you're going to be facing gives you a little bit of an edge because you will have been able to get more chemistry, get more competitive minutes, and that makes a huge difference. I think that the Tino Lopez find has been phenomenal. I think that Peter Kingston is a guy that I would be surprised if he doesn't get signed past this weekend. I think that guys that have had to step up, like Alex Roldan, always, even if he has to go back to his original position at right back, that level of confidence and leadership, it all kind of works together and it cements the group, right? And we'll talk about injuries, but all of those things do kind of come together in a way that give you a very strong competitive edge. And any time that you can tell yourself, look, we got all these points, we are probably, I don't know if they would say this, but we could say this. The Sounders are in a better position than we thought they would be after this amount of road games. I thought they would have a couple more draws, is kind of what I had in my math, and they didn't. And they still haven't reached their top form because that at some point they're gonna make it click and they're going to be a team that's better in possession, that maybe has a starting 11 that gets more repetition together, and they start finding that beyond chemistry is that ability to just play off of each other in a way that is instinctive and not systematic. And so all of these things that you could add to what you're already doing, I'm not saying that this team is a juggernaut. I'm just saying that I've been very impressed, and I think that they're going to be even better as time goes along. I mean, their floor is extremely high. And to your point, and that you started off with, the defense has been that platform that has allowed them to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, look, if Albert Rusnak continues to score at the rate that he's scoring at, the Sounders might be in trouble. But you could look at it another way and say, look, the Sounders have gotten to this point without really any serious contributions from Rusnak, without any contributions from any other number nines. They have, they've done it with a mix and match center back pairings. They've been rotating their goalkeepers. I really am encouraged a lot by everything I've seen. And I think it's very easy to look at this all as sort of half or glass half full, as opposed to, or more than half full. I mean, this is like a pretty full glass, frankly, right now. So I'm feeling good about these things. But that said, we did get some pretty sad news this week when it came to the injury situation, at least in one big way. Nikola Petkovic, who had just given us interviews on, I guess it was Thursday. And then we found out that on Saturday, he tore his ACL in training. And that almost certainly means he's going to be out for the year. And I know you had not been quite as high on Petkovic as some of us, but I also think even you recognize that he was a positive influence on this team. Whether or not the Sounders were going to bring him in full time was a separate question, but this is definitely a loss for the Sounders, at least as far as their depth goes.
Not just their depth, but it does hit the group on a mental and vibe aspect. Like I could hear it from players that I talked to off to the side. It's hard to see a guy come in, fit in. You mentioned that interview, that scrum that you had that I wasn't necessarily a part of, but to what I've heard from you guys, he felt, I don't know, lighter on his feet. He felt like he was, he was starting to feel at place. He was starting to feel like this was somewhere where he could be here a longer time. So that mental part always sucks. And on the soccer aspect, yes, I'm not gonna hide the fact that I wasn't as high as maybe you or Jackson or some of the other guys in the beat were on him, but I could definitely appreciate that he was a guy that was going to be another rotating piece and a different profile of center midfielder. That is always part of it. Did I think that he was going to be a guy that has, as maybe Brian surprised me with, said that he's seen enough where, he would have been more than happy to bring him back or have the discussion or something to that effect of that he had seen enough to where it'd be an interesting proposition to see what that would have been in the future. But now all of that just kind of falls apart because it's severe injuries, an ACL. It is one that's going to take him out for the year. So what that looks like moving forward, it's pretty murky because of the loan and the potential transfer buy and all of these things. But I want to focus on the person and the player. I do feel like he had been someone that the players were starting to feel like he was one of the guys, and he did it pretty rapidly, and he really integrated in the group, and I always appreciate that from players because it's not an easy thing to do always.
And one of the things that was, to your point, that made it, they added the emotional aspect to this, is he had just talked to us and he was seemingly so happy to be in Seattle. Like he just loved, he talked about how the way that his playing style just fits in a lot better with the way that the Sounders want to play. And, he was asked about the competition with guys like Hassani and Christian and Snyder and even Peter Kingston. And he was like, these are perfect players, and they're not just perfect players, they're perfect people. And he was just like lumping praise on these guys who are ostensibly his biggest competition for minutes, and not just for minutes, but for the decision to bring him in full time. And I think it spoke a lot to the way that he's fitting in with the group and the way that he was just, feeling it. And so my suspicion is that the Sounders are probably going to try to figure out a way to keep him. I don't think they're going to, and I think there is in a weird way, I could see this almost working in the favor of him staying because he's obviously not going to hit all the playing time escalators that would have driven the price up. And I also wonder if there's some more negotiation to be done about whatever I don't know what the purchase price on his loan was, but I can't imagine that Charlotte is more interested in bringing him back now. And they might just be willing to sort of write it off at this point. Whereas the Sounders, I don't know that, I think realistically, he's probably not going to be a useful player until the 27-28 season. That feels like so it's not just the rest of the year. It's probably the sprint season next year that he's not up to full speed. But, if the Sounders like him, why not? Right. I mean, he has a very low cap hit. He's going to be, if the Sounders were to bring him back, he'd only be a U22. And so, there's some reasons to bring him back. And I do sort of hope that it can work out. Now, I don't think the Sounders should do anything stupid and buy him at the full price. But if they can figure out a way where, I would imagine he would much rather rehab here. I guess that's sort of, to put it in more humanistic and more current terms. If they can figure out a way for him to rehab here, I think that's good for everyone.
Yeah. And maybe not the time to necessarily, judge him on, his soccer overall, his technical abilities or anything like that. But just going off of the injury, it'd be a tough buy, I think, because you also don't want to devalue his price. So I think that there's a lot of things where maybe he wants to stay, but I'm sure that he's, like every player does, sees himself as a player of X amount of money or compensation. And I just think it'd be difficult. I also don't see, maybe they would, but I don't know if I see Charlotte just letting him go on a free even after the injury. So this is where it becomes more business than anything. And I don't know if there is a way to make business make sense for both sides on this one, but that does not discount the fact that he has definitely made an impression, and that is worth highlighting, right?
Yeah.
He left an impression with the team and the coaching staff, and that goes a lot to say for his skill set. And maybe not just in the limited amount of time that he's had on the field, but maybe in the training ground and everything that he does on the other side and really making a name for himself within the team. So I wish him nothing but the best. I hope that he has a quick and full recovery from a really tough injury, and that his future goes the way that it needs to go. I don't see him coming back with the team, but I certainly hope that he gets better.
Yeah, I do too. And I know a lot of people are out there sort of putting on their tinfoil hats a little and wondering if the Sounders are doing something that is causing all these ACL injuries. And I suppose it's possible. But I think there's a couple things that maybe are inflating the numbers a little bit in people's heads. One of them is, keep in mind that Jordan Morris did not do his ACL the second time when he was with the Sounders. He did that when he was on loan to Swansea. So I don't think we can really count that one. Yes, the Sounders just had a situation last year with Paul Arriola. But before that, it was João Paulo, who was obviously an older player. And, and I think in maybe our minds, it ends up feeling like a lot more than it really is. But also ACLs are pretty weird injuries in that they are not entirely predictable. And it's, they almost all are happening on grass too, which I think is kind of interesting, because I think a lot of folks tend to associate these types of injuries with turf. And I don't know that any of, other than the one that JP did in the 2022 final, most of these are happening on, almost all these are happening on grass. I do think it's weird that the Sounders keep having all these weird knee injuries, and I don't know, maybe there's something there, but I will just kind of remind everyone that Injuries in soccer have become more common across the board. I think that probably has more to do with the amount of games and travel that team players are being asked to do, and not really anything that the Sounders are doing. All the studies that we've been able to find suggest the Sounders are pretty average when it comes to injuries, and they may actually be a little bit above average when it comes once you factor in how much more travel they have to do and the fact that they play their home games on turf.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because it is something that has been on my mentions, has been brought up by plenty of people, and there's always this almost knee reaction to when you hear ACL. You just go to turf, you go to what are the Sounders doing, and most of this have happened not just in grass, but they're really hard. And I guess this is just stating the obvious here, but they're just hard to predict, because it's not like your muscles where that you're wearing them down, and part of the sports science department can manage and limit minutes depending on like certain acids and like strains that you see when it comes to those ligaments. It's just really hard to predict. So it's unfortunate. It could be a curse, I don't know, but the reality is that it happened, and now the Sounders have to move forward. It sounds like Brian was he sounded confident in the depth at that position with Sonny Dotson and Snyder Brunell. I think Peter Kingston's going to come to play in that position if they end up signing him, as we think they will. So there's definitely a lot to be discussed there. I'm not sure, and you could talk a little bit about this, Jeremiah, maybe not too long, but there is that ability to perhaps open up that international spot for the upcoming window, and maybe remove some of the salary, although it wasn't much. So maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah. So the Sounders have, in theory, they can still play. Like, I think there's some details being worked out exactly how this would work because it's a loan, but theoretically the Sounders would be able to put Petkovic on a season-ending injury list, which would free up his international spot, which would free up a senior roster spot, and would allow them to use the prorated portion of his salary again. In the case of Petkovic, he only counts $200,000 against the salary cap because he's a U22 player. So, let's just call it $150,000 that they might be able to recoup. Maybe 100, maybe it's even as close to 175. But either way, it's not a ton of money on the cap. It might be something though. So I would imagine those are all things that in a roundabout way kind of help. I don't think any of those would be used until the summer. They can make signings right now, but the kind of signing they can make are guys who are on free transfers or players who are already in the organization. So theoretically they could sign Peter Kingston. And I would imagine it becomes a relatively straightforward decision with Peter Kingston. He does, I'm almost positive, have one more loan left. So the Sounders could bring him up for a short-term loan for this week or potentially next week or whenever they might need him. And then at that point, they would have a decision to make about whether or not they want him to bring him in full-time. That's what happened with Tino Lopez. Every indication that I'm seeing from the Sounders is that they really would like to bring Peter in full-time. I don't know why they wouldn't at this point. He's done everything that has been asked of him. He seems like a good fit. He seems to have some flexibility. And that's probably the only short-term thing I would expect him to do, is to just sign Peter Kingston. But in the summer, they do have a lot of flexibility. I wrote about this over this week in an article that was called "Selling to Win: Why the Sounders Altered Their Roster Building Approach." And essentially what I did is I explained why the Sounders have suddenly started selling all these players. And even though I use this term in the story, I do think it's a little deceiving to say that the Sounders are suddenly a selling club, because a selling club implies that you are oftentimes selling your best players, even though it costs you short-term results. All indications from the Sounders are that they aren't really interested in selling their best players. They're interested in selling players who are more the surplus types. Reed Baker Whiting, Georgie Manungu, Danny Leyva, especially those three. And you can go back to Josh Atencio last year. all those players were sort of struggling for playing time. They did not have very clear paths to playing time. They were definitely not starters at the time that they were traded, and they were sent places where they were able to be more. They had better prospects for playing time. The exception to this is obviously Obed Vargas. That's a whole other situation that we've talked about a lot. He was clearly a starter for the Sounders. He went someplace where he is no longer clearly a starter, but again, that's a whole separate issue. But for the most part, the Sounders are bolstering their ability to go out and sign someone else. And that is really what this is all about. It's about their ability to get rid of some of the surplus players and ideally sign someone who slots in higher up in the roster, ideally like a starter type of player. You know, they can go out and they can sign a TAM, for instance. And so I think that the expectation should be that they will do that this summer. And I know there's a lot of people out there saying like, well, we've heard this story before. I will just add, we haven't really heard this story before because in the past, what we've been talking about is theoretical resources to spend. Now they have what I would estimate at something like $4 million in salary cap space that they can use as early as the summer.
And that's the reason why I think even in our last show, I called it almost obligatory or mandatory, or they're being forced almost into having to make a decision because they have this war chest of GAM and open cap and honestly necessity moving forward for them to be able to take a nice deep look at this roster and say, where can I get better, or where within our pipeline are we not seeing something coming up? So we need to make sure that we fulfill that position for the future. And we do that by going to the international market and bring in A, B, and C. So I do have a lot of stock in the Sounders making a couple of very interesting moves in the summer. I would love to see a U22-9 come into this team, and I don't want to bring back that whole, we beat that horse to a pulp already, so we don't need to talk about that all over again. But I would like that.
Well, let's. I guess I'll close it on this. I would recommend everyone go back and read the story that I'm talking about. There's also a story that's circulating that I just linked to on Blue Sky that sort of gets into this as well. But one of the reasons the Sounders felt like they had to get more into the transfer market was because they were seeing a reality where in MLS, the amount of GAM that you can acquire has exploded. There is something like almost 100% more GAM filtering around the MLS ecosystem today than there was in 2021, which is a huge increase. And the Sounders were seeing teams like Inter Miami and LAFC, especially, who not only were spending money on the transfer market, but were also selling players in order to build up their GAM, their GAM bank account, essentially. And what that essentially does is it allows you to spend more against the salary cap. And so instead of a salary cap of 6.5 million, LAFC might have a salary cap of 17 million. And if the Sounders only have a salary cap of 13 million, that obviously is putting them at a pretty significant disadvantage on top of all the transfer spending they might be doing on DPs and whatnot. So the Sounders saw this shifting marketplace, and they just felt like, look, we just have to be more willing to trade young players and to sell them for assets, especially if they aren't contributing right now on the first team. And so that's really what we've seen. Danny Leyva, as good as he wasn't necessarily pushing. He was not pushing for starters minutes. You could say the same thing about Reed Baker-Whiting. You could see the same thing about Georgie Manungu. And I think this is a pretty astute thing for the Sounders to be doing. And yes, it does hurt their depth on some level, but it doesn't really do anything to their top, 12, 14 to 16 players in the rotation.
And I don't think that there is, first of all, I think this is smart business. And I think that is a facet that this club had not used to their best effectiveness, to really bolster other abilities to continue to feed the roster. Because yes, and I love that Brian said this, by the way. He said, look, maybe we got it wrong on Georgie, and maybe he's gonna go out there and just be this great player, but that it was good business. It was $2 million mark, and that says a lot about the player. And if he does well, I wish him nothing but the best. And I think there is a sense of, you also have to do right by the player. And I feel like Danny Leyva was a guy that it'd been years and years and years where he wanted to be a main piece of the team. And even now, when I thought he was going to be a guy that was going to be slotted into potentially be a starter instead of Obed Vargas, I don't know if he was going to stay there because maybe he just didn't quite fit what Brian wanted. And Brian can make that decision and say, look, you're definitely going to give him minutes elsewhere. Same thing goes with Reed. Same thing goes with Georgie. Georgie was probably not going to get much minutes moving forward, because it's not that he wasn't a good player. It's just that the system just asked for other things. And so whether they get it right or wrong, that will be determined by results, by, I'm knocking on wood, people, not any more injuries on that side of the field, and anything that might make it seem like, see, if Georgie was here, we'd be a better team off. But as things stand, it was good business. So I think that you don't, and I get the whole, we're not a selling team, because you're right, a selling team is kind of farming talent to get it out, like Dallas did at one point, where sometimes they wouldn't even make it to the first team and they were already in Europe, right? So I get that. That's not what the Sounders want to do, but you can still be a team that sells your surplus talent, and that makes you a known commodity that is credit to your system, to your organization, and it could bolster ultimately your main team. Because look, if you brought Jesus Pereira for what, 2.8, right? And then you brought Paul Arriola, I think Jesus Pereira is going to be a player that's going to be here for a very long time. And if you can get those types of players for a substantial amount of GAM, then shoot, go ahead and do it. Plus, to your point, we don't know how much longer GAM's going to be around. I mean, for all we know, in 2 years, GAM could disappear, and you didn't cash in all your chips that the casino gave you, and now you're just sitting with it. So I think that there's a lot of smart business being done by the team on that regard.
Yeah, and I'll just add also that it's working out for the players that they move to. I'm looking at Danny Leyva's playing time in.
He just had a baller of a game a couple weeks ago.
His last game, he was like the player of the week, one of the top players of the week for Necaxa against Tijuana in a 3-0 win, and he's been arguably Necaxa's best player. Frankly, he's been really, really good. He's seeing his profile raise tremendously. And I don't know that, to your point, I don't know that was going to happen here, especially with Hassani Dotson, especially with Snyder Brunell. There was a very real possibility that he was going to just get stuck in the same situation that he's been in for the last 6 or 7 years if he had stayed here. So this has worked out really good for him. It has, it looks like Reed Baker Whiting is doing well in Nashville. You got to love that for, it does hurt to see them doing well on other teams, but it also shows that the Sounders are producing good players. Reed just coming off of a league start in which Nashville won 5-0. He started one of the legs against Inter Miami in CONCACAF Champions Cup. He's getting some good minutes. He's showing that he can play there, and good for him. I'm ecstatic for him. Would I have liked to have seen that here? Absolutely. I definitely would have liked to have seen that here. But it wasn't necessarily in the cards, and I think you would be hard pressed to make an argument that he'd be doing better than Nuhu is right now. I mean, Nuhu is having a great year, and I don't know that he would have dispatched. He would have gotten rid of him. Georgie Manungu we haven't seen how much he's going to play, but it looks like he's in contention to be a starter for Colorado. It looks like Colorado's system is set up really nicely for a player like him. I expect that to be a good move for him too. So on some level, we can't sort of hoard talent. Like the Sounders have to sort of get out of the mentality of worrying about what's going to happen if they trade a player. If they aren't playing, they should be moved on, especially if they don't have a clear pathway. You know, it's different for like a Snyder Brunell, who maybe he's not playing right now, but he's clearly working himself up to that point. But I just think you have to be smart about when you move players and how you move them. And to me, it looks like that's exactly what the Sounders are doing.
Yeah, and you don't want to stump talent, and that's what that can do. You hinder that player's ability to move forward. And if anything, and to add on and kind of segue into the basically next part of this show, when you look at what they've been able to do with Tacoma Defiance and the academy and the guys that are coming along, then, you know, as those players go along, then there are more minutes for a guy like Peter Kingston, who looked really, really good this week in training. He was right next to Hassani Dotson, who looked full in training. He looks good. Let's look at the center backs. I mean, you know, Stu was once again partial training, but they're definitely starting to ramp up his workload, as I heard it. So it sounds like he's going to be ready to go. Yep. So those center backs are going to start to also look for minutes. And you and I have talked about it in the past, where players get into this gray area where, let's say Stu, you don't necessarily want to drop him to play in Tacoma Defiance because he's too good for it. And then you're not getting first team minutes because there's other guys there. So then they just sit there and they have nowhere to go. And I think that some of the situations that I think Brian pointed out very clearly, you could say that they were in some of that area. Well, I can't put Reed in Tacoma Defiance and I'm not giving him enough playtime. So man, if we can move him on, then, you know, that's always good for them as well.
Absolutely. And so before we take a break and we push it to the segment with John Arnold to talk about Tigres, and by the way, we will come back after that and we will preview the Houston Dynamo match as well. I just also wanted to give a shout out to the Sounders Academy U15s who qualified for the GA Cup final, where they'll play Valencia, so sort of a rematch of the 2019 GA Cup final. They won 2-0 over LAFC in the semifinals. They got a goal and assist from Chris Batiz, is a name that you may remember. He just signed with Defiance. At the time, he was 14. He just turned 15. So he seems to be having a great tournament. I believe he has 7 goals and like 4 assists in this tournament so far. So he's just balling out, absolutely. And then right now, the U16s are playing in the semifinals against a team from Brazil whose name is escaping me, the Red Bull team from Brazil. And so there's a possibility that both Sounders U15s and U16s will be in the GA Cup final, which is pretty cool. Those are the only 2 age groups currently in the GA Cup. So that's it's good news all throughout the organization right now.
Yeah, and it's great to see because we've had those I don't know if litters is a good word in English, but in Spanish you use camadas, like litter of players that have come across and they've won tournaments. And if it's turned out, I think Danny Leyva was one of them, Obed Vargas was one of them. You had Ocampo, who, well, maybe he didn't necessarily come through fruition, but those groups of players built teams and clubs. I mean, I don't want to get killed for this, and I'm not comparing it. I'm not saying that that's who they are, but like Barcelona has had those litters of players, and Man U, and it talks very well about a team whenever you do get those youth teams that can go out there and perform at that high level and win things and play together, and then at one point they can all, if they all make it, 3 or 4 of those be at the first team level. And it really becomes a culture thing that continues to just repeats itself. So it's great for the club.
Absolutely. Well, on that token, we should probably cut over to John Arnold of Getting CONCACAFed, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about the Houston Dynamo game, which is coming up on Saturday. You're listening to Nos Arietes on the Sound at Heart Podcast Network. Sounder at Heart has been around in one form or another since 2009. In 2026, though, we make a pretty significant evolution when we go analog. Yes, that's right. In the year of our Lord 2026, we are publishing a real-life magazine. We're calling this thing 4, as in Sounder at Heart 4.0, but we're stylizing it as IV because we absolutely love Roman numeral. And if you want to refer to it as IV, that's cool too. The first issue has a comic book style cover that was hand-drawn by local artist Kevin Newber. Features by Tim Foss, Susie Rance, and Charlie Boehm, a statistical deep dive by Kat Bush, a Q&A with Brian Schmetzer, a column by G. Willow Wilson, and photographs by Noah Reif, Max Aquino, Mike Russell, and Jane Dershowitz. I could not possibly be more proud of the work everyone put into making this, and I think you're going to absolutely love it. If you'd like to get your hands on one of these limited edition copies, we're currently selling them for $15 on our website. Get yours now. Nos Arietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at hacksandferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to hacksandferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. Joining me today to help preview this upcoming series against Tigres is the one and only John Arnold of Get CONCACAFed. How's it going?
It's good. I'm always happy when there's CONCACAF, and there's been an international break, which is like my happy place, into a CONCACAF Champions Cup serious match day, all MLS versus Liga MX. So
yeah, this is what
I can't get much happier. This is why I do it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't know how often, I guess this is not that rare for us to get all 4 quarterfinals be Liga MX MLS matchups, but you always savor these opportunities because it's like a real measuring stick as far as those things go.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see with Leagues Cup's evolution, you know, with games actually being played in Mexico, which has kind of been the big, I think, hanging question. MLS is dominating Mexican opposition in Leagues Cup, but they don't have to go to Mexico. Now some teams do. So maybe we'll start to see that as a kind of acceptable, quote unquote, second barometer. But with the home and home format that doesn't exist in the final, unfortunately, anymore, Sounders fans, you know, I think this is still this round and the next round, if there are cross matches, which I think most people hope there will be. I mean, even if
there's a world where they are
MLS, even if you're a huge MLS stan, I don't think you just want like, oh, it's all MLS teams. And obviously, if you're an MLS stan, you don't want it to be all Mexican teams. So anyway, this will be for me the most kind of reliable sort of barometer. It always is. And even when the Sounders lifted the trophy, what I said, hey, we got to celebrate the Sounders. And I'm not just saying that for your audience, although, you know, I don't mind a few brownie points here and there. But I wrote and consistently kind of said, like, what's important for MLS to say, if they're ever going to be able to say we've surpassed Mexico and are the top league in CONCACAF, is not winning the CONCACAF Champions Cup one time, but winning it consistently. And that just hasn't happened, right? So this is it. This is the barometer. And this is, you know, when you get these matchups, you're right. I think they are ones that we savor, partly because it's just a lot of fun, and partly because like this will be part of the discussion of where's the game at and these sort of like things that we like to talk about as nerds for a long time.
Yeah, well, before we get too deep into this matchup, what do you like if you're assessing the 4 quarterfinals? How do you like? Where does this one rank in terms of the potential mismatch?
Mismatch as far as like the Mexican team has a better, bigger spending roster, or
just like, I mean, so for instance, LA Galaxy are going to be huge underdogs against Toluca, right?
Yeah,
and then then it goes down from there, like the relative expected competitiveness of these, and I'm looking at it
in a tight series. It's the tightest series for me because, I think Toluca's been so good recently in the Galaxy. We know about the Galaxy. LAFC, Cruz Azul, well, maybe that's the tightest one. I mean, the Cruz Azul could easily win the league. They won the last CONCACAF Champions Cup. LAFC is a very good team. And then Nashville Club America is a weird one because, America is this dominant force. It's always this, huge spending, but they're in this big time moment of transition. And then Nashville is Nashville, where they had a really good off season, but I think there's still sort of a hipster's choice, maybe, if you're going to say, oh, they're going to come out of the East or something like that. So I'll kind of back myself though that Sounders Tigres I think might be the tightest series. LAFC is just a weird one too because I think you have this outsized sun-sized gravitational pull. I don't think that's astronomically correct, but you have Son, who is worth $1 billion and is such a special player. Cruz Azul can't really match that. Yet at the same time, they are the reigning champion. Sounders fans will remember what they did in the previous tournament. That's going to be a really tight series. I just wonder if LAFC's budget spend maybe kind of changes things. But I think this Tigres Sounders series is one I'm really excited for. Partly because I think the teams are even, and partly because I'm not really sure what to expect.
Well, and I think there's also some interesting parallels between Tigres and the Sounders. They're both sort of northern teams. They are teams that are outside of the normal media sphere. One of the things, if people haven't, I would really suggest they go and watch the video that what's the title of the series?
Football Cities, the travel video series.
Yeah, it's a travel video series, and you did one on Monterrey, and it is spectacular. But one of the things that you do a really good job of illustrating is how Tigres and Monterrey had to sort of go outside of the normal Mexican media and create sort of their own media ecosystem in order to get some attention, because they just do not get the same sort of play that the teams certainly in Mexico City and Guadalajara get.
Yeah, I think you could almost draw a parallel to baseball in the US, where this is something that's been around forever. And so you have the Yankees and the Dodgers, but there's still people who are oh, the Dodgers, the New York team. That's how far back some of this idea goes in Mexican soccer, that the Grandes, the big four, are the three Mexico City teams and Chivas, and that's it. And anyone else isn't worth respecting. When Monterrey comes in, both teams in Nuevo León have spent huge amounts of money in the last 2 decades, bring in all these internationally recognized stars, lift all these trophies, and yet people in Mexico City and Guadalajara are still saying, haha, yeah, good job, little brother. We don't actually respect you. So, I don't know that the Sounders fit perfectly in that box, but I think there definitely is the kind of no one likes us, we don't care. The weird thing is that in a lot of ways, I guess the Timbers are the ally there, where you're actually right. Cascadia rocks, because you have Rayados, who's this hated team right across town, but they're fighting the same battle. And so a lot of times you sort of end up as brothers in arms in the fight against the Mexico City media dominance. So but Tigres and Monterrey just have this very unique culture, and there's this unique soccer culture around Monterrey because they really care. They really love the sport. El Volcan, the people who are able to go, is just going to be a fantastic experience. Hopefully nothing crazy happens, in a bad way. Hopefully it's crazy in a fun way, but it should be. I've always had great experiences there. Of course, I'm not wearing a rival team's jersey. I'm usually wearing a suit jacket. So people are usually this is a harmless white man here. And you're usually right. But no, all that to say, the Volcán is a special place. The soccer culture in Monterrey is special, and it is different and isolated from the rest of the US, similar to what you guys have in Cascadia for sure.
Yeah. And I think one of the things about El Volcán especially is that it is this old stadium. I assume it's part of the university, which is where the team draws its name from, and not such a dissimilar way as Pumas does in Mexico City. But it does have this atmosphere that feels like if it's not the best in the Western Hemisphere, it has to be the best in North America, right? It's really an amazing thing to behold.
It's my top atmosphere in CONCACAF as far as a club game. I think it's the best. I will say, the last time I was there was a CONCACAF Champions Cup game and 2 rounds ago, and are they filling the stadium for a team that now even I can't remember, which is not a good sign. Shelahu was playing against Rados. Oh, Forge FC, our friends from Canada. Like, did that pack out the Volcan on a weeknight? No, it did not. But like, the atmosphere is still good. The supporters are still crazy. And so when these games start getting more important, or when the games are on weekends that people can easily go to, I think it's the best atmosphere in CONCACAF.
Yeah, I mean, it is really an amazing thing to behold. And I think what we saw in the FC Cincinnati match was it has a characteristic unto it that sort of brings an energy that can lift a team. Like, I don't know that I would have expected, like, I don't know if this is ever, I haven't seen this written about, but I am skeptical that any team in CONCACAF has ever overturned a 3-0 deficit the way that they did. And they did it by needing 5 goals, which is even more amazing. But I also wonder so the last time the Sounders play, or the only time the Sounders played at El Volcan, was back in 2013 in the first leg of the CONCACAF Champions League at the time, which was a precursor to the Sounders becoming the first MLS team to knock out a Liga MX team from CONCACAF. But what we saw in that game was that, as great as the atmosphere was, it didn't seem to have the same energy. And I'm guessing that's in part because it was not an elimination game. And I'm wondering, is that being too hopeful to think that maybe El Volcan's superpowers will not quite show themselves in this game?
I mean, I think that's a question, but I would also say that, like, the respect for MLS teams has grown a lot since a decade ago. I think people really see these games, even on the Mexican side of the border now. Like, I think people really see these games as important and understand sort of what it will mean to be there in the stadium to help your team. The other thing that I think is a bit of a disadvantage is, like, as far as how much will El Volcan weigh or not weigh on the shoulders, is that Tigres haven't played a home game since that Cincinnati game. It's a long time for people who are used to going to the stadium every week or every other week to wait. And so I think there's been this anticipation of not necessarily, oh my gosh, the Sounders are coming, but like, I can't wait to go back to the stadium, right? I will say they then play Chivas on the weekend at home, which will be another big game. They're in a weird spot in the league right now. They're kind of hanging on to a playoff place. It's going to be a quirky Liguilla, the playoffs as well. And remember that the 2-season system means that the playoffs are coming up. I think they'll start May 1st, if I'm not mistaken. But any Mexico internationals are going to get released before the Liguilla. So it's going to be a very strange into the season. Tigres won't be wildly affected like that compared to like a Chivas, who only field Mexican players and have like 4 or 5 guys who are going to get called up to that World Cup squad. But there's still guys who they may be missing. And so that game against Chivas on the weekend will be important. So we'll see if fans are ready. But I think I'm expecting it to be a good atmosphere. I wouldn't be surprised if the number is higher for the Chivas game on the weekend than during the week, just because that is a big factor. But I think it'll probably be a pretty good crowd at Volcan.
And so let's dig into a little bit the actual on-field product that is Tigres. Now, this is a traditional power. They have been one of the best teams in CONCACAF for really as long as I've been following all of this. But they seem to be maybe ebbing a little bit right in this moment. Is that a fair way of putting it?
I think they're both ebbing and flowing. It is the most inconsistent, certainly the most inconsistent Tigres I can remember. When they've been bad, they've been kind of bad. When they've been good, they've been really good. Right now, they seem to be both. They have these moments where they lose 3-0 in Cincinnati and like come off blaming Donald Trump because the airspace was closed the day before the game, so they couldn't get in. And they were saying, well, if we had our rest, we probably wouldn't have lost 3-0, which you say, come on, that's ridiculous. And then they go out and win 5-1 in the second leg. And you're like, well, maybe so. But that's not the only sort of like weird roller coaster they've been on. They won the Clásico Regio, the most important game, against Rayados with like a late goal from André Pierre Gignac, who's still going in his 40s, which obviously I appreciate as someone who hasn't reached that milestone yet. I also haven't reached his goal milestones, but it's just good to see him still going. But like, they haven't really replaced him. Like, he won't start in the series with the Sounders, at least it's unlikely, but like, they really don't have a super great answer. They've got El Búfalo Aguirre, the Uruguay international, who they picked up from America this offseason, is like who they're sticking up there now, but no one is Gignac. But after that Clásico Regio game and after that loss to Cincinnati, they host Querétaro, a really poor team in Liga MX this year. and they have this scoreless draw where they had like 2 or 3 shots on goal. And then they do that against Cincinnati, and then they go to Juarez and lose. So I just think that maybe in the past, this team has been deep enough to sort of compete in all fronts. And I don't know that that's the case now. I don't know that that's the case for anyone right now in Mexico. I mean, I think even Cruz Azul is probably the one team that is going in both tournaments where you say, man, they could absolutely win a double. But even then, I wonder if they'll have to start prioritizing with the players they're going to lose in the Liguilla for the title run or the World Cup run or whatever you want to call it. But I think you see that with Tigres right now, that even though they're spending a lot of money, that they bought Angel Correa, that they're trying to bring in Gignac replacements, that they have homegrown players who they're developing, that they brought Marcelo Flores in and Diego Lainez in several transfer windows ago, that they're now well adapted to the team. Even despite that spending, even despite the depth of the team, we always love to say compared to MLS, you look at guys on roster slots 18 through 25, they're making more money, they have more pedigree, they're international players in the case of like Marcelo Flores. But like, I do think that you're seeing that depth be less deep all across Mexico, but definitely in Tigres.
And so who are the players that Sounders fans should be sort of keying on as indicative of who this team is?
I think like Angel Correa is obviously a recognizable name. He's won the World Cup, came from Atletico Madrid. He's been a good signing. I don't know what the expectations were necessarily. I think he's probably reached but not exceeded them. But I think like if the Sounders are going to have success, it's because fans are not learning the name or hearing the name of like Juan Brunetta, who's been around, so maybe people know him as well. But I think like he's a player who they missed him with a knock a couple weeks ago. He's a player who like he will create opportunities, and with Aguirre up top, he can finish them. That's about it. Like all he can really do is finish off an opportunity, at least from my perspective. We'll see if I'm proven wrong, but like that's about it. But Brunetta is the kind of guy who can make that moment of magic happen. Another guy they were missing for a lot of the season to injury is Gorarian, who scored super late in that Cincinnati game. That was his first game back from injury. He's been able to recover, obviously, with this international break. Kind of a do-it-all midfielder. He can get dirty. He can play out wide if they want him. He can play in the interior. So he's a super useful player. And then, like, look, it's still the same guys. Like, Gignac is still there. And Nahuel Guzman is still at the back, and he's going to steal the show no matter what, right? Like, he's going to do something weird. He's going to goof around with the referee. He's going to goof around with the fans. And, like, I find him to be a fun and interesting character. He's crossed the line a few times, like when he when he had a laser pointer in the press box of the Clásico Regio and was flashing it at his Monterrey rivals, even though he was not able to play. That crosses the line. But like doing a magic trick in Leagues Cup, I think is fun. So I don't know. Maybe that's just where my line is. But like he will be the goalkeeper and he will do something weird. So I think that's worth watching as well. Those are some names I would highlight. And then you get into like Lainez is on the wing, Osiel Herrera likely starting on the wing, probably over Marcelo Flores. Speedsters, total opportunity to create some chances. But again, like I'm sort of saying like, oh, these guys are all dangerous. But then you look at like, no goals against Querétaro, 1 goal in a loss to Juarez, no goals in the first leg against FC Cincinnati, needed a 90th whatever minute miracle from Gignac against Rayados, lost to Puebla. Like these are the results. This is what's happening. Right. And so like we can go down the list and say like, oh my gosh, the attack. But I think the fact that Brunetta and Gorarian were both missing for a period and that they couldn't score during that period or couldn't score where they needed to is indicative of maybe how important those two guys are beyond the names that I think people recognize from having been around for a long time.
Absolutely. Well, if you had to make a prediction in this thing, I'm going to put you on the spot. Does this feel like, well, let me put it another way. If the Sounders can win this, do you think it has a way of legitimizing the run in a way that apparently beating Leon and Pumas didn't in 2022?
Yeah, sure. I guess. I mean, I think like whatever. Like if people find that legitimate or not, I think is a bit ridiculous, to be honest. And again, like I'm certainly not pandering. Like I was in the FC Dallas supporters group when I was a kid. Like that's my loyalty, such that it exists. And then I covered the team for a decade, which, as you know, like can often make you quite cynical about a team when you're that close. I know you still have your love for the Sounders, but that's somewhat hard to maintain. We can talk about that another time, your fandom and how you kind of keep that. But I wouldn't say I'm a fan of FC Dallas and haven't been for quite some time. So that's my loyalty. Do I think the Sounders should be celebrated for winning CONCACAF Champions Cup? Absolutely. Do I think their win was like legitimate and impressive? Yes. Like it's a weird thing because CONCACAF then like sort of re-brought the old champions into the fold. So you can say like there are other MLS teams that can point to a trophy, but in the modern era, what MLS team has the banner? What MLS team has the trophy? It's just the Sounders, legitimate or not. And there's been other teams that have had easier paths, like God bless the Montreal Impact, but like, do we think that they were that good to get like as far as they did in the 2014-15?
Yeah.
No, like I don't think any of us do. It was fun. I still like watching the highlights, but like that's a team that you can maybe say like, oh, I don't know if they would have made it that far if they'd had tougher opponents. And when they played the tough opponents, they lost. That's the question, right? When the Sounders have played the tough opponents after they won the championship, after they won the Champions Cup, I think like when they've played the tough opponents, they struggled, right? Like I probably don't need to remind people about Cruz Azul, which I know was sort of like exercised by the Leagues Cup and winning the Leagues Cup, but like that was still a thing that happened as well. So, does this win legitimize anything? I think the closer we get to just saying all victories over quarterfinalists in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and if you win a semifinal, that it should count, the better, because I just think that shows the tournament is growing up in a lot of ways and sort of being taken seriously. And who knows what the future is? People are talking about what about the Libertadores, and the sport doesn't seem to be going in a direction where it's like, things are getting better and we're keeping patient and letting a tournament grow and organically and not worrying about how much money it's making. But it's a bit of a meta answer to say like, if you win this, you can hang your hat on it. Why not? Yeah, Tigres are inconsistent right now, but like they're Tigres. They have a world champion. They have Andre Pierre-Gignac. They have Nahuel Guzman. They have Joaquin, who's like a top center back in the region. They have all these other great players who would start on any other team, because that's what happens when you get to these levels of the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And if Tigres, if the Sounders get past Tigres and they miss the Liguilla, does that like mean, that Tigres were bad and that's the Sounders should be embarrassed? No, like this is a series, and I think the series sets up well for them with the first leg in El Volcán, honestly. That's huge,
and not having to play a league match in between, which
totally
was a kind of surprise gift.
And Tigres has the Chivas game, so I mean, I do think that like there are reasons to say that the Sounders should be able to handle this type of series if they win it. Like, I guess what I would say is like the legitimacy comes from like winning the series, and if you win it, then great. And if you can, people want to pick at Tigres after, that's fine. Who else is in the semifinal? And the answer might be Nashville. But if they beat Club America, that's also legitimate, right? Like there's nothing wrong with beating that. If the Galaxy get past Toluca, or if LAFC get past Cruz Azul, that's also legitimate. But the importance is, Jeremiah, vice versa, right?
Right.
If Tigres beat the Sounders, Toluca and the Galaxy, I'm gonna put that one in a different category. But like, if Cruz Azul beats an LAFC team that kept Buonga, that bought Son, your audience knows LAFC. Like that is also impressive. That is also legitimate.
Absolutely.
So that to me is the growth. That's the excitement of this round. And if the Sounders get through, then I absolutely will applaud them in written form.
There you go. Well, speaking of written form, where can people read you?
I've got a newsletter called Getting CONCACAFed. I have said for years that if you get the joke, the newsletter is for you. You can sign up for free. I'm still on Substack. We'll see how long that lasts. But for now, if you just search Getting CONCACAFed, I'm there. There's a free option. You should get 1 or 2 newsletters a week if you go free. If you go paid, I'm actually kind of telling you all the Mexico stuff every Monday, plus the CONCACAF Catch-Up, which is like a news roundup and some analysis of like everything going on in the region. I try to really get to everything. Obviously, no one man should consume that much CONCACAF, so I don't always get there. But like, if you want to know why the manager of the Nicaragua men's national team doesn't get a U.S. visa to enter the country, that's in there. If you want to know, who's the most promising player coming out of Belize, that's in there. If you want to know why Jamaica struggled and didn't get to the World Cup, that's in there. So again, if you get the joke in the newsletter, it's for you. I'll shift from like the international window to CONCACAF Champions Cup. this week and next week. So hopefully people check that out. And I'm also on TikTok and Instagram. I do little videos. So
yeah, you do
YouTube for the travel video.
I was gonna say your video, you do great video work. Like it's sort of this wonderful blend of lo-fi and but clever. And I appreciate the tone. I appreciate the work. And yeah, I'll give another plug for your YouTube videos, which I think are really well done. And
yeah, please check out Football Cities. It's on John Arnold FC, JON, Arnold like Arnold Schwarzenegger, FC like football club. Yeah, it would mean a lot of people like watch the Monterrey one, especially if it helps you get some recommendations. And you can hit me up on Blue Sky if you're like, what neighborhood should I stay in? Or I'm stuck. Where do I get tacos or whatever? I'm available over there too on John Arnold FC.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, John. Welcome back to Nos Audietes on the Center Heart Podcast Network. Hopefully you enjoyed that little segment with John Arnold of Getting CONCACAF. That is a newsletter that I think anyone who is interested in the region soccer should be following. He does a great job covering everything from Liga MX all the way down to the national teams of Guyana and Barbados and anything that's going on in CONCACAF, he's getting into.
So. He lives it too. He like consumes it. He's out there on the road. He watches the late games. He watches the CONCACAF games that nobody's watching, like the Trinidad, Tobago, Curacao types. I mean, it's just he really loves the region soccer. So if you do want to get more within that sort of information, he also the Liga MX, man, he's completely connected. Like he knows the players, knows the systems. I mean, yeah,
he's down there covering games. Yeah,
nothing but praise for John Arnold, man. He's one of the real ones for sure.
Absolutely. Well, let's turn our focus though to the next game on the Sounders schedule, and that's the Houston Dynamo. The Dynamo are off to a pretty good start. You know, it's been they've only played 4 league games, so they haven't been nearly as busy as the Sounders, but they seem to be a very different team right now. They, have historically been much more of a defensive minded team under Ben Olsen. They like having the ball, but they tend to have the ball as a way of keeping it away from the other teams. But this year, they seem to be a much more offensive team. They're coming off 2 straight games where they scored 3 goals. They were just in a shootout with FC Dallas where they lost 4-3. But then before that, they beat the Timbers 3-2. And this Guilherme, is that the right way? How you say that?
Yeah, Guilherme. Yep.
He from Brazil is just absolutely balling out. 4 goals, 3 assists already this year. This is an interesting Houston Dynamo team.
They are interesting. And it almost seems out of character. I thought it was funny that, Brian, he talked about Ben as one of the old guys, and he said that the team really reflected him. And maybe it's true in terms of this team, and his teams are always like a strong challenge, a very high tempo, but this one is particularly aggressive and actually good on the ball. Going forward, I think that they're more direct in possession, and I think Ben wants more out of Hector Herrera in that department of controlling the ball, and I think he expected him and McGlenn to work a little bit better to figure out who is going to be the one that is going to control possession and set the tempo. So a lot of times they're skipping through midfield a little bit, and Achache still, does a good job at switching the point of attack and putting some through balls. But Guilherme is the epicenter of every important, dangerous attack that this team has. And that Dallas game, I mean, he balled out, and he really brings the team back almost by himself. Like Dallas was up 2-0. Guilherme picks up a silly ball, like they're pressing, and it's not a high press, but the goalkeeper is out, like way out of his box, and he puts a medicine ball to whoever the left back was, and Guilherme just immediately hits it. He's got the explosiveness to get on the ball. Goalkeeper's running back trying to get inside the box, and he puts it away. Minutes later, he from a set piece, from a corner, he puts in a perfect ball for the next goal. And then before the half is even over, Guilherme, once again, not in the outside channel, not even in the inside channel, from midfield, like center midfield, he somehow gets into that area and he sees Inali making a great run on the left side, and he cuts through, like, I don't know, maybe 6 or 5 Dallas players with one through ball, and it's just phenomenal. So Guilherme is definitely the X factor for this team. I was able to get on the presser for Houston Dynamo this morning.
Oh, today,
and, look, Benny had nothing but great things to say about this Sounder team. He knows that this is probably the best defensive team he's faced, during the season. So he praised the Seattle for them being this disciplined team, that they don't shoot themselves in the foot. So it was going to be extremely difficult. And he said, I hate them, but I respect them. And the hate is obviously because they have his number. And I kind of asked him about that. They have his number. He mentioned the red cards. He said we get a lot of red cards against them, but he definitely respects them. Actually, part of my question was about him and Brian being one of the old guys, and he said, "Look, Houston wants to be the Sounders. Like we have nothing but respect because he's part of the Mount Rushmore of coaching." So a lot of praise from Benny there. But that's a good team. It's a different type of Houston Ben Olsen type team. Like I have not seen a Ben Olsen team that plays like this, to be quite honest.
Yeah. Speaking to your point of the Sounders sort of having Benny's number, 10 straight, the Sounders have gone unbeaten against Houston. I guess that would maybe be all under Ben Olsen. I'm not 100% sure when he started, but certainly he's never beaten the Sounders since he joined Houston. Overall, the Sounders are 18-5-9 against Houston. Yeah. And that's both at even at home, the Sounders, even on the road, I should say, the Sounders have a winning record. They're 6-5-5 at Houston all time. So this has been a pretty lopsided rivalry, I think you could say, if you can even call it a rivalry. Even the teams have met in some high profile meetings. They've faced off in the playoffs just as recently as 2 years ago. So Houston's not a bad team, but the Sounders definitely have had their number. And Houston, Benny's right. They do tend to get a lot of red cards when they play the Sounders, but I also think Benny maybe complains a little bit too much when it comes to the referees. He spends a lot of time bemoaning the number of red cards without always looking at the incidents in which his teams are getting those red cards. I mean, if you go back to the playoffs, Hector Herrera got himself sent off for spitting at a referee.
Yes.
That's not, they're not out to get you, Benny. You've got players spitting at referees. They're going to get sent off. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. The second yellow on Vichenko in this game too. That's something to point out. The center back will be out because he got double yellowed against Dallas. And that one seemed fair as well. And he did mention the red cards overall, even before talking about the Sounders. And he said, the referee has been horrible, but I guess it's coming from the guy with a team with 4 red cards, right? So I think he's aware. He just says he doesn't agree with all of them.
Sure. You get enough red cards and you're going to disagree with some of them.
Exactly. And that's Benny, though. And look, he does not look like an old guy like that. He looked like he got squabbles. Like he's one of those coaches that I wouldn't like. If he's getting in your face, like he could mad dog you. Like he gonna mad dog you. Like he definitely is not afraid of coming at the referees, which is pretty hilarious. But in terms of his team, and I think the holes that I've seen a lot of Houston Dynamo because Guilherme I really like. And honestly, I've been wanting to watch Ache and what he's done. So I've watched like their last 3 games, and just defensively, it's almost beyond comprehension how poor they are. They're so flat. There's no staggering. He plays this, or at least this year, it's a 3-4-3 or wing backs, no matter in what setup they set up. And he is kind of trying to get his best, most dangerous players on the field. So he has like Inali playing with Bogets on that side, and Herrera has no defensive player really, and neither is McGlenn. So there isn't really
there's not really a defensive midfielder among the group.
Well, in Spanish, ball winners. There's no ball winners. The way we refer to it. There's nobody that's really doing that sort of duty. So they do get kind of cut up pretty quickly. They have a hard time with balls behind their line, like straightforward balls. That's why I'm kind of hoping we see Jordan Morris, if not as a starter, sometime in the game, because I feel like this setup, unless Benny throws a curveball at Brian, which he could, if they played like they've been playing, that high, that open, there's going to be space to run behind the defense.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting test for the Sounders because they've been very stout defensively. They haven't really had to open up, and it'll, if Houston can force them to make some changes, that's certainly notable, and I wouldn't discount their ability to do that. This is a good offensive team who is generating real chances, but I don't think the Sounders can afford to give up the ball as much as they have been giving it up. They're going to need, I think they're going to be in trouble if they're giving up 65% of possession the way that they have been at times this year. This is the kind of team that could really punish them, I think.
Yeah. And so it all goes to how Brian sets it up. So, something that we learned this week was that obviously Christian Roldan and Moose are going to meet the team in Houston. They haven't been part of the training week, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to not be available or available to start that game. So both of those players are in contention to start. Alex Roldan, he definitely would not be part of this game. He never joined the rest of the team. So to my understanding, he hasn't been part of the full training session. Right. So my guess is they're saving him for Tigres, which would make a lot of sense. Kalani has been really good. And another thing I learned this week is that Kalani can juggle the hell out of a football, right?
American football.
30 times he did it.
Yes.
In comparison to Nuhu and Hassani, who Nuhu got 3. Hassani got 5 or 4, I think.
Yeah, Nuhu had 3, I believe, is what I saw. But it was, so that was actually a very funny little thing where they were having a contest to see who could dribble this, the American football the most. And they were trying to tell Kalani that he only did 10 or something like that. And I was like,
Nuhu was trying to cheat.
Yeah, he sure was. That was kind of funny. But yeah, I think that there's going to probably be some limited rotation between these two games, but it looks to me like, we're going to probably see Albert and Jesus in both games. We'll probably see Jackson in both games. We'll probably see Nuhu in both games. Yep. I would, it will be interesting to see if Rothrock starts both games or not. I would assume that Jordan will only start one just because he's coming off of the injury still, although he might not want to. And so, and I will say, so while we were recording just now, Peter Kingston's signing was made official. So he actually is on a first team deal now.
Which we should have asked, and we did not ask.
I know. I was
Brad would have said something. Yeah.
He probably would have said something. Exactly. So shame on us. Sometimes we fail you guys by not answering, getting all the questions that we should be asking asked. But, we'll live. On to the next day.
Yeah, I guess so. Sometimes we're asking some.
Sometimes we get caught up asking questions that are not as important. Without pointing.
And we don't ask all the questions, so we gotta.
Yeah, we don't get all exactly
time, and that's what sucks. Sometimes you're like, we didn't really need to ask that right now. But you know what? I'm not even gonna go there. All I'm saying is that I'm glad Peter Kingston just seems like a real not a baller, but a gamer. He's a gamer.
Good word.
He is a gamer, and me and Danny Jackson were talking about it, and he just has this like matureness about him. This almost like roughness, but yet with this really good technical ability that I didn't really realize he had until he's cameos have just gotten better and better, from San Jose to Vancouver, the Spokane game. I mean, all of these little cameos, you're like, man, this guy, he has some technical abilities. So when you put that together, it just screams Brian Smetzer ball. And so, I think that he's going to be a great fit.
It's interesting that there seems to be this sort of like almost conveyor belt of players who, even though they don't look fantastic when they're with Defiance, they are able to sort of level up when it's like the nature of their game is that it actually gets better when they're surrounded by better, and I think I put Peter Kingston in this category. I put Tino Lopez in this category. I put Kalani in this category, where they actually look better. They look more up to speed than you would like. They look like they're very competent players at Defiance, but they aren't throwing up big numbers. Snyder Brunell is another one of players like this who they just are very competent, and that translates very well to the next level. And Peter Kingston is one of these players. Peter Kingston, I'm really excited. I hopefully get to tell his story more, because I think he has a really interesting story. He came through the Sounders Academy. He grew up in, I believe, Kirkland or Redmond. He grew up on the east side, but he came through the Sounders Academy. He was considered a high-level prospect. I believe he was on those, if not the 2019 team, then the 2022. No, I think it must have been the 2019 GA Cup team that won it. So he was considered a pretty high-level prospect. And then he went to Seattle U. It didn't really work out. He transferred to UW. He did a little bit better there. But his only real impressive number season was a summer that he spent in Ballard, where he helped them win the national championship. But he didn't get drafted, and he played for Defiance last year, and he was good. He wasn't necessarily great, but all the talent ID people kept talking about how much they thought of him. And so he's been someone that I've been keeping an eye on just because of that. And, he's looked great when he's played for the Sounders. I'm really stoked. I think he could potentially fit in really nicely here.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's just a level of composure that I guess I had not necessarily seen, and the ability to play beyond your years, both at the physical level and the vision and the quick thinking, all of those little things that I look for in a player. He has very rapidly shown glimpses of it, to the point where I was just pretty excited to get him into the team. So kudos to him. Kudos to the Sounders for once again finding diamonds in the rough, regardless of where they're at. Right? I mean, they just seem to find talent everywhere. So credit there for sure.
Yeah, it is a really remarkable thing that they've been able to do in terms of translating the Defiance to the first team. And it's not, it would be any team could promote a bunch of guys from their second team to the first team. The trick is, are you able to stay competitive? Are you able to stay as one of the top teams in the league? And really that's what makes this such a remarkable thing, is that the Sounders have been able to do that. They've been able to promote guys from Defiance and not miss a beat at the first team level. And Peter Kingston is just the latest example of that. I believe that gives them 14 players who had previously played for the Defiance, who got their start, basically their professional start with the Defiance. And that's half their roster. I mean, that's more than half their roster. It's 14 out of 27 players. That's an amazing accomplishment. I got to say, I'm very impressed.
And it works. It fits because there is, one structure between both teams. There's one curriculum, one soccer module, and
they practice
Jackson
together.
Reagan.
That's
Jackson
the
Reagan
thing.
talked to us about it.
Yep.
This
exactly.
week, talking about Tino Lopez. He's like, we've known for a couple of years that this guy was going to be a first team player, and right. Is he fit in? He's going to come in. He's going to perform. So it is something that is remarkable and very unique to the Sounders.
Yep. And it is, you just love to see it. It does make it feel like a real club. And I think that the Sounders have done, I think every single time they sign a player like this, also it reinforces the idea that if you come to the Sounders and you even if you are signed to the Defiance, you're going to get a chance to move up to the first team. That does not guarantee that you're going to move into the first team, but it shows that there is a real pathway here. It makes recruiting so much easier, and it is a virtuous cycle. And you love to see it. I think it does make it, and it makes it feel all, it just makes it feel better all the way around.
Yeah, that's why I'm interested in hopefully between Freddie and Paula Nagamura, one of those two is going to be part of our next coaches corner. And I am curious about, because Nagamura has been out in this field and the second teams for forever. So I'm really curious of his thoughts on what the Sounders have been able to build, and has he seen it before? I mean, it's really impressive. So I really want to get his take on what he's seen so far, and is it impressive? Is it he's coming way out of the organization, so getting his take would be very interesting.
I totally agree. Well, I think that's probably a good place to call this a show. We'll be back next Friday, but where else can people listen to you, Niko?
Yeah, Bossman, of course. You guys can always find me on Mondays with Ari Lillenwall on Love and Scorchers Kickoff. We're probably going to have a really good one this week, coming from a pretty heavy set of games and previewing the Tigres game. On Thursdays, I'm on Soccer Down Here. On Thursdays with Nico, we discuss the whole league. You could find me there. On Tuesday, I will be doing a segment for Washington Sports Wrap on Fox 13. So go ahead and check for that. I think we're going to be previewing the Tigers game, that segment as well. So you could find me there. And of course, my favorite show here with Jeremiah on What We Learned This Week. Hope you guys continue to enjoy it. I don't think I have anything else left. I wanted to make sure. No, I think that's all the newsworthy stuff that I have. We were able to get it out. I do want to leave it here on our show that I think that the Sounders are going to go to Tigres and get a result. And I think that they're going to go there and get a result. I really do. I like what I'm hearing from the team. Brian Smetzer talked about the Colmillo, and he's like, look, we can't coach it. Guys got to feel it. And he reminded us of that game you and I were at where Christian Roldan is down on the floor for a long period of time. I swear it feels like 10 minutes, and they end up going back and looking at VAR. And so I really do think that this team with the Paul Arriolas, with the Jesus Ferreras, with this kind of, I don't know, they feel like a confident bunch, and a team that has been to Mexico, has been in some difficult stadiums. I really do think that they're going to get a result, man. So I just wanted to get it out there, put it out on our show, making sure that our people know that I think that the Sounders could really do it.
Yeah, I think I like your confidence. I also feel like this is a team that the Sounders potentially match up with okay. Tigres has not been the monster that they have been in the past. They are just not as they've been more inconsistent. They've been dealing with some injuries, and I think that FC Cincinnati result can sometimes scare you a little bit because it does show how explosive they are, but I think that also speaks to how much FC Cincinnati fell apart. I think if the Sounders can get past Tigres, that they suddenly have a very positive path to the final. And, that could be really exciting. It would be quite a way to start the year. But if they can get a 1-1 result, I think would be about perfect. If they can go 1-1, I would absolutely take that.
And that I don't know why I have that number here. Hopefully that happens.
Okay.
And they're a good team. I think individually they have really good quality players, right? Linus is good. Angel Correa is good. El Búfalo Aguirre is good. Bruneta's good. They have really good players. The collective play for me is not all there, and I think that's what's separating them. I mean, they're seventh. They just lost to Juarez, by the way.
Right.
I mean, yes, they had an early red card. I get it, but they still lost to Juarez. It's Juarez. So I think that yes, this Tigres team is good. It's very good, but
they got talent. But they're, Gignac is not the player that he once was. And, there's some exploitation to be had. And frankly, if the Sounders want to be a regional power, this is the kind of game you have to win. or this is the kind of series you have to win. Tigres is not going anywhere. It's up to the Sounders to raise their level to be able to beat this kind of team. And, let's cross our fingers. I think they have got a good chance.
Absolutely. I think my dog knows the end of the show. I'm glad he held off this long. I don't know if you could hear him. Hopefully not. But hey, as always, man, I appreciate you breaking it down. Jeremiah, you run this show like no other. Thanks to everybody for listening. Just excited to get back here. I'm excited to get back here. Oh, you won't be here on our next show.
Oh, that's right. I guess we might as well share. I'm going to be out of the country starting on next Thursday. So I won't be here for the next game. And I will be, I'll be doing our normal show on Monday with Aaron, but I will not be on the next What We Learned this week. And you and Tim are going to do the next 2 shows. So hopefully people enjoy listening to you and Tim, but we're still going to record. Don't worry. I'm just not.
That's a good sign, people. It's a good sign for Sounder at Heart. Jeremiah, studio space, vacations,
taking vacations,
just hang out. He's just chilling now. He's just counting the dollar bills. I mean, okay,
exactly.
I see you. Signing autographs.
That's
it's
right.
a whole other Jeremiah. I don't recognize you.
All right. Well, let's get out of here on that note. I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Full Pool Wines. This is Nos Arietes, which is part of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. We will catch you next time.
Let's go, Sounders.